They thought I was just a confused old man who spent his days fishing and staring at walls. My son-in-law actually laughed when he whispered to my daughter that it was time to put the old dog down and sell the house. They saw my gray hair, my slow walk, and my reading glasses. They thought I was helpless. They had no idea that the man they were planning to destroy used to write secret computer codes for military companies in the 1980s. They didn't know that while they were busy planning to steal my life savings and lock me away, I was already recording every single word they said. I am Harold Bennett, and this is the story of how I let my own family walk into a trap they built for themselves. If you have ever been looked down on by the people who are supposed to love you, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss how this story ends, and tell me in the comments what city you are watching from. I read every single one of them. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. The date was October 24th, to be exact. I remember the date because the air had that crisp bite to it, the kind that tells you winter is coming fast to Northern Virginia. I had spent the last 6 hours at the lake. I wasn't really fishing, just sitting in my 1998 Ford truck, thinking about the future and enjoying the silence. I am 72 years old, and after 45 years of marriage to my wife Patty, silence is something I have learned to enjoy in small amounts. But I always looked forward to coming home. I pulled into the driveway at exactly 4:17 in the afternoon. Our house is a strong 2-story home we bought back in 1985. We paid it off in full 14 years ago. It was supposed to be our safe place. I grabbed my fishing box and the cooler. I expected to smell Patty's famous pot roast the moment I opened the front door. Tuesdays were always pot roast days. It was a routine we had kept for 30 years. But when I unlocked the door, there was no smell of food. There was no sound of the television in the den. There was just a heavy, choking silence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was the kind of silence you feel in a room right before something terrible happens. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. I called out for Patty. No answer. Cold knot formed in my stomach. My first thought was a fall. At our age, a fall can be the beginning of the end. I rushed toward the kitchen, my boots heavy on the hardwood floor. What I found in the kitchen stopped me in my tracks. Patty was sitting at the small breakfast table. She was not cooking. She was not reading. She was curled up, her knees pulled slightly together, her arms wrapped around her chest as if she were freezing, even though the heat was set to 72 degrees. She was staring blankly at the wall, her eyes wide and glassy. She was making a sound I will never forget. It was a low, steady whimpering, like a wounded animal trying to stay quiet so a hunter won't hear it. I dropped the cooler. Ice and water spilled across the floor, but she didn't even look up. I rushed to her side, kneeling down. "Patty," I said, grabbing her hands. Her skin was ice cold. She looked at me, but it was like she was looking through me. Her eyes were wide. She was shaking so badly that her teeth were chattering. Before I could ask her what was wrong, a shadow fell over us. I looked up to see my daughter, Emily. She was standing in the doorway that led to the living room, her arms crossed over her chest. She was wearing her business suit, looking perfect, not a hair out of place. Her face showed annoyance, not worry or fear. "Dad, you're back early," she said. Her voice was flat. I looked from her to her mother. "What's wrong with her?" "Emily, call 911. She's in shock." Emily didn't move. She let out a long, dramatic sigh and walked over to us. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't call 911, Dad. It's just another episode." "Episode?" I stood up, pushing her hand away. "What are you talking about? Your mother has never had an episode in her life. It's dementia, Dad," Emily said, shaking her head with a pitying look that made my blood boil. "We've suspected it for months. Today was bad. She started screaming that there were men in the house trying to kill her. She started smashing dishes. "Look," she pointed to the trash can. I looked inside. There were indeed pieces of white plates, but something didn't seem right. I looked at the floor. It was spotless. Patty is very careful about cleaning, but if she had a breakdown and smashed dishes in a rage, there would be dust, tiny pieces, something left behind in the cracks between the floor tiles. The floor looked like it had been freshly mopped. I looked back at my wife. Patty was not looking at the trash can. She was looking at me, and in that split second I saw it. Her hands were gripping the bottom of her shirt so tight that her knuckles were white. She was twisting the cloth, a nervous habit she has had since we were dating in college. She does that when she is terrified. Not confused, not losing her mind. Terrified. "This is not dementia," I said, my voice low and dangerous. I spent 30 years studying threat situations. I know what fear looks like. Just then, the back door opened and my son-in-law, Jason, walked in. He was on his phone, laughing about something. When he saw me, he hung up immediately and slid the phone into his pocket. He flashed that fake smile that I had hated since the day Emily brought him home. "Oh, Hal, you made it back," he said, his tone talking down to me. "Tough scene to come home to, huh?" He walked over to the counter and poured himself a glass of water, acting like he owned the place. He leaned against the sink, looking down at us. "We had to hold her down, Hal," Jason said casually, taking a sip of water. "She was a danger to herself. We already called Dr. Evans. He agreed that it's time. We can't have her running around breaking things. It's not safe for you either. You're getting up there in age, Hal. You can't handle a woman in her condition." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I looked at Patty again. She was not looking at Jason. She was actively avoiding looking at him. She pulled back when he stepped closer. That was not the reaction of a woman who had lost her mind. That was the reaction of a woman who was being threatened. "What did you do to her?" I asked. "We calmed her down," Emily said quickly, stepping between me and Jason. "We gave her one of the calming medicines the doctor gave us. It's for the best, Dad. She needs to sleep." She reached into her pocket and pulled out an orange pill bottle. I had never seen it before. She shook a pill into her hand and moved toward her mother. Patty looked at the pill. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were begging. It was a silent scream. She was begging me to stop them, begging me to save her. But her mouth stayed shut. She didn't say a word. It was as if she was afraid that speaking would bring down some terrible punishment. "Take it, Mom," Emily said, her voice sweet but hard underneath. "It will make the bad thoughts go away." I moved to stop her, but Jason stepped in front of me. He is 6 feet 2 inches tall, 40 pounds heavier than me, and 20 years younger. He put a hand on my chest. Not a shove, but a firm block. "Let Emily handle it, Hal," he said, his voice dropping lower. "You're upset. You're confused. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We've already arranged for a ride to the Golden Oaks facility tomorrow morning. Tonight, she just needs to sleep, and so do you." Golden Oaks, the state-run nursing home 3 towns over. The place where people went to die alone. I looked at Jason's hand on my chest. I looked at Emily, forcing the pill into my wife's mouth. I looked at Patty, swallowing it, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. I realized then that I was outnumbered. If I fought them physically right here and now, they would claim I was violent. They would claim I was losing my mind, too. They would call the police and have us both locked away by sunset. I was in my own kitchen in the house I built, and I was completely trapped. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart to slow down. I relaxed my fists. I let my shoulders drop. I forced my face to look tired, defeated, old. "Fine," I whispered, my voice trembling just enough to sell it. "Fine. If the doctor says so. Jason smirked. He patted my shoulder like I was a small child. Good man, Hal. We're just doing what's best for the family. Emily guided a stumbling Patty out of the kitchen toward the living room sofa. Just let her rest here, Dad, she said over her shoulder. We'll stay the night to keep an eye on things. You should go upstairs. I watched them settle my wife onto the couch. I watched Jason lock the back door and put the key in his pocket. I was a prisoner in my own home. I walked slowly to the stairs, dragging my feet, playing the part of the broken old man they wanted to see. But as I climbed those steps, my mind was racing. Dementia doesn't happen overnight. Dishes don't clean themselves up without a trace. And my wife doesn't look at her son-in-law with terror unless he has given her a reason to be terrified. I went into our bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. I waited until I heard the television go on downstairs. I waited until I heard the clinking of beer bottles. Then I stood up. I went to the closet and moved the heavy winter coats aside. Behind the wall, hidden in a false panel I installed 5 years ago, was the access to my private computer network. They thought they had cut me off. They thought they controlled the story. But they didn't know about the cameras I had in these walls. They didn't know that my home computer system was designed to capture everything. I opened my laptop, skipping the main Wi-Fi that I suspected they had already messed with. I connected to my secure local network. I needed to see what happened in this house before I walked through that door. I needed to know why my wife was crying. I typed in my password and hit enter. But instead of the usual stream of information, a black box popped up on the screen. The text was red and blinking. Error. No data found. Drive erased. My heart stopped. The last 72 hours of video were gone. Wiped clean. This was not an accident. This was not a mistake. Someone had manually accessed the physical computer in the basement and erased everything. Emily thinks I just play number puzzles on this computer. Jason thinks I can barely work the television remote. They don't have the skills to do this. This was professional. This was planned. I stared at the blinking red cursor. They thought erasing the drive would hide what they did. They thought that by erasing the last 3 days, they could make up whatever story they wanted about my wife's mental health. But they made one big mistake. They didn't know about the backup system. They didn't know about the ghost server buried behind the wine rack in the basement. The one that copies everything in real time and locks it down the moment the main system is tampered with. I sat back in the dark, the glow of the laptop lighting up my face. I cracked my knuckles. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. You want to play games? Let's play. I started the recovery program from the ghost server. A loading bar appeared on the screen. 1%. It was going to be a long night, but by morning, I would know exactly what kind of monsters were sleeping downstairs. And God help them when I did. The clock on the nightstand read 2:14 in the morning. The house was silent, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, choking quiet of a prison cell after lockdown. Next to me, the empty space where Patty usually slept felt like a wound. She was downstairs on the sofa, drugged by our own daughter. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the creaks and groans of the house settling. Every instinct I had, learned over 40 years in intelligence and defense work, was screaming at me. Energy was pumping through my body, keeping me wide awake. I knew I had to move. I slipped out of bed, my feet finding the floorboards I knew wouldn't squeak. I didn't need a flashlight. I knew every inch of this house. I built the deck. I wired the electrical system myself back in 1989. I moved like a ghost into the hallway, pausing at the top of the stairs to listen. From the living room below, I could hear the soft snoring of Jason. He was likely sprawled out in my chair, guarding the exit like a prison guard. Good. Let him sleep. He thought he had won. He thought the old man was upstairs crying. I crept down the hall past the guest room where Emily was sleeping and opened the narrow door to the basement stairs. The hinges made no sound because I had oiled them last month. I went down into the cool, dusty air of the basement. This was my space. This was where I kept my workbench, my tools, and the heart of my home security system. I made my way to the utility closet in the back corner. To someone who didn't know better, it looked like a mess of wires and blinking lights, a hobby project. Emily often joked that it looked like a spaceship control panel from a bad 1970s movie. She would buy me large print number puzzle books for Christmas, thinking her father's mind needed simple puzzles to stay active. She had no idea that the machine in front of me was running military-level secret codes that I wrote myself. I sat down in the rolling chair and woke the monitor. The screen glowed with harsh blue light. I squinted, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I needed to see what had happened in the kitchen before I arrived. I needed to see the moment Patty supposedly broke those dishes. I went to the video storage folder. My system was set to record on a continuous 7-day loop, automatically erasing the oldest data. I clicked on the folder for October 24th. Empty. I frowned and clicked on the folder for the 23rd. Empty. I checked the 22nd. Empty. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the basement temperature ran down my spine. I opened the system logs. There it was, staring back at me in plain text. System erase started. User. Admin time. 1,400 hours. 2 o'clock this afternoon. 2 hours before I got home. Someone had logged into the physical computer and wiped the drives. They didn't just delete the files. They erased the entire storage system. I leaned back in the chair, the springs groaning softly. This was not a dementia episode. Dementia doesn't know how to access a secure computer and execute an erase command. This was not an accident. This was a cover-up. Emily and Jason. It had to be them. But they were not smart enough with technology to do this remotely. They had to be physically here. They had planned this. They waited until I was out at the lake, alone and unreachable, to launch their attack. They wiped the video evidence of whatever they did to Patty. But why go to such lengths if they just wanted to put her in a home? They could have argued about her health. Wiping the security footage meant they were hiding a crime. It meant they needed to erase something that would send them to jail. I needed to check the external connections. I rolled the chair over to the network connection panel on the wall. I reached for the main cable that brought internet into the house. It was hanging loose. I picked up the end of the cable. It had not fallen out. It had been cut. The clean edge showed someone used wire cutters. I checked the phone line connection. The copper wires were cut, twisted, and pulled as if someone had yanked them out in anger. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. We were completely cut off. No internet, no phone, and with the signal blockers I suspected Jason had in his pocket, probably no reliable cell phone service inside the house either. They had trapped us. They had cut our lines of communication. This was basic war tactics applied to an elderly couple in the suburbs. I felt a wave of anger so strong my hands started to shake. They treated us like enemy soldiers. They treated the man who paid for their college and the woman who nursed them through childhood sicknesses like targets to be taken down. But they were amateurs. They were greedy, proud amateurs playing a game they didn't understand. They thought destroying the main computer was the end of it. They saw the blinking lights and the hard drives and thought, if we destroy this, the evidence is gone forever. They didn't know about the backup. I stood up and walked over to the large oak wine rack on the far wall. It held about 50 bottles, mostly dust collectors we were saving for special occasions that never seemed to come. I reached behind a bottle of 1995 wine on the third shelf. My fingers found the small hidden button I had installed 6 years ago. I pressed it. There was a soft click, and the entire section of the wine rack popped forward an inch. I pulled the false panel open. Behind the rows of wine bottles, nestled in a fireproof safe built into the concrete foundation, was a small black box. The ghost server. It was an independent unit, separated from the main system, running on its own battery backup. It was designed to copy everything the main cameras saw in real time, but it only received data. It didn't send anything out. It was invisible on the network, a black hole for information. I built it for a worst-case scenario, a home invasion where the attackers might destroy the equipment. I never imagined the attackers would be my own children. I pulled the connection cable from the ghost server and plugged it directly into my laptop, skipping the broken house network entirely. My heart was pounding against my ribs. If they had found this, if they had been thorough, then I truly had nothing. I would be fighting their word against mine. I opened the recovery software. The laptop screen flickered. The fan worked harder as the computer powered up. The software searched for the secret hidden section on the ghost drive. For a long, painful minute, nothing happened. The cursor spun. I held my breath. Then a message appeared. Enter password. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was there. The data was there. They had burned down the house, but they didn't know I had a copy of everything stored in the vault. I typed in the password. It was a string of letters and numbers that meant nothing to anyone else. The coordinates of the place where I first met Patty in 1968. I hit enter. A new window opened. Recovering data. Estimated time, 4 hours. A green loading bar appeared at the bottom of the screen. It moved forward. 1%. I sat there in the dark basement watching that green bar. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. In 4 hours, I would see the truth. I would see exactly what happened in my kitchen. I would see the faces of the people who hurt my wife. But 4 hours was a long time. I couldn't just sit here. I needed to know why they did this. Why now? Why us? Money. It always came down to money. The green loading bar on the ghost server screen was moving forward slowly. 1%, 2%. It was going to take hours to recover the 72 hours of deleted video, and I didn't have hours to sit around doing nothing while my family slept upstairs. I needed to know how much damage they had done. I needed to know exactly what they had done to us, not just emotionally, but financially. My wife Patty was the most organized woman I had ever met. She balanced the checkbook down to the penny every Sunday evening. We had spent 45 years building a safety net. Money saved that was supposed to make sure we never became a burden to anyone. We lived carefully. We drove old cars. We used coupons. Also, we could have peace of mind in our old age. I reached into the bottom drawer of my workbench and pulled out a laptop case. Inside was my backup computer, a clean machine I kept for work, and a wireless internet stick that used cell towers. They had cut the internet cables and ripped the phone wires from the wall, thinking they had cut my connection to the outside world. They forgot that I spent 20 years making sure communication lines stayed open in places far more dangerous than the suburbs of Virginia. I plugged the stick in. The little blue light flickered, then turned solid. I was online. My hands were steady, but my stomach was churning. I went to the login page of our bank. I typed in my username and the complex password I changed every 90 days. I hit enter and waited for the security code to arrive on my backup phone, which I kept charged in the safe. The code came. I typed it in. The page loaded. I froze. I stopped breathing. I stared at the screen, blinking, hoping it was a computer error, a mistake in the display. But the numbers were clear, black, and impossible to deny. Balance. 0.00. I took off my glasses, wiped them on my shirt, and put them back on. The number didn't change. It was still 0. I felt cold sweat break out on my forehead. That account should have held $485,250. It was our life savings. It was the money for medical care if one of us got sick. It was the money to fix the roof. It was the money that made us free. Gone. All of it. I clicked on the transaction history, my finger hitting the mouse button harder than necessary. I needed to see where it went. I needed to see the theft. There were 3 wire transfers, all started yesterday, October 23rd. The first transfer was for $200,000. Time, 10:15 in the morning. The second transfer was for another $200,000. Time, 12:30 in the afternoon. The third transfer was for the rest, $85,250. Time, 2:45 p.m. They had emptied us completely in less than 5 hours. I looked at where the money was sent. It was sent to a holding account for a company listed as Guardian Legal Services LLC. I had never heard of them. I looked at the note attached to the wire transfers.
Urgent Legal Payment, H. Bennett. H. Bennett.
That was me, Harold Bennett. My mind raced trying to make sense of it. Why would Patty send nearly $500,000 for legal services? Why would she do it in a panic, emptying everything we had in a single day? Patty was a retired librarian. She had never broken a law in her life. She panicked if she had an overdue library book. She drove 5 miles under the speed limit. She was the woman who returned extra change to the cashier at the grocery store. The idea that she would need a criminal defense payment was ridiculous. Unless it wasn't for her.
H. Bennett.
I sat back in the old chair, the hum of the computer fans filling the silence. They hadn't stolen the money from her. They hadn't hacked the account. Patty had the passwords. For money to move like this, she had to have done it willingly. Or she had to have done it because she was terrified. She emptied our accounts because she thought she had no choice. I closed the bank page. I needed more. The money trail told me what happened, but it didn't tell me why. I needed to get inside her head. I needed to see what she saw yesterday while I was sitting by the lake, not knowing that my life was being torn apart. I opened a new window and went to our email provider. Patty and I shared a password system, another security rule I insisted on years ago. I logged into her email account. The inbox was clean, strangely clean. Just a few newsletters from the garden center and a receipt for the electric bill. But I knew better. When people are panicked, when they are trying to hide something, they delete. I clicked on the trash folder. There were dozens of deleted emails, mostly junk, but one stood out. It was time-stamped yesterday at 9 a.m., just over an hour before the first wire transfer was made. The sender was an unknown encrypted address, an email account that looked like a random string of nonsense letters and numbers. But the subject line made my blood run cold. Evidence of accident, Harold Bennett. I stared at those words. Evidence.
Accident.
Me. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I suddenly felt very old and very tired. I knew with the sinking certainty of a man who has seen too much of the dark side of human nature exactly what I was about to find. They weren't just lying to her about her own sanity. They weren't just telling her she was crazy. They were terrifying her with something much worse. They were threatening me. They knew Patty's weak point. It wasn't herself. She would endure any pain for herself, but she would burn the world down to protect me. I clicked on the email. The body of the message was short, written in urgent, bold text. Mrs. Bennett, we have obtained footage of the hit-and-run incident involving your husband's vehicle last night. The victim is in critical condition. The police do not have this yet, but we are prepared to release it to the authorities unless a settlement is reached immediately. See attached. Below the text was a single video file. I looked at the file name, Dashcam_footage_oct23.mp4. I didn't click it immediately. I took a breath. I mentally put on the armor I used to wear when I reviewed casualty reports in the 1990s. I detached myself. I became the analyst, not the husband. I moved the cursor over the file. They had made up a lie so big, so terrifying, that my wife handed over $500,000 to make it go away. They made her believe that I, her husband of 45 years, had hurt someone. They made her believe I was a criminal on the run. And they did it to steal our retirement. They did it to clear the accounts so that when they threw us into the state-run nursing home, there would be nothing left for us to live on. I clicked the file. The video player opened. The loading circle spun for a second, and then the image appeared on my screen. It was night. It was raining, and I was looking at the hood of my own truck. I leaned in, my eyes narrowing. It was time to see just how low my family had sunk. It was time to see the lie that broke my wife. The video player launched in the center of my screen, the black window expanding to fill the display. I leaned in, my breath catching in my throat as the timestamp in the corner began to move forward. October 23rd, 10:14 p.m. The footage was grainy, looking like a cheap aftermarket dash camera. Rain was falling in sheets, cutting across the view, turning the street lights into blurred streaks of orange and yellow. I recognized the hood of the truck immediately. My 1998 Ford F-150, the faded blue paint, the chip on the bug guard that I had been meaning to fix for 6 months. It was all there. The truck was moving fast, too fast for the neighborhood it appeared to be in. The engine roared through the laptop speakers, a deep mechanical growl. Then it happened. From the right side of the screen, between two parked cars, a figure stepped out. A woman in a dark coat. She didn't even look up. The truck didn't brake. There was no screech of tires, no desperate swerve. Just a sickening wet thud that made me physically flinch, even though I knew I was sitting safely in my basement. The body hit the front of the truck with brutal force, flew up onto the hood, smashed the windshield into a spider web of cracks, and rolled off into the darkness. The truck kept going. The engine revved higher. Panic in the acceleration. The camera angle cut suddenly. It switched to an interior view, a camera mounted on the rearview mirror pointing back into the cab. And there I was. My face was lit up by the green glow of the dashboard lights. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. My mouth was open in a silent scream of terror. I looked crazy. I looked drunk. I looked exactly like a man who had just taken a life and made the split-second decision to run. I stared at my own face on the screen. For a heartbeat, a terrifying heartbeat, I doubted myself. I felt cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. Did I go out last night? Did I have a blackout? Is it possible that my mind is failing me just like Emily said? But then the analyst took over. The part of me that spent decades looking at spy photos and finding the one hidden weapon in a forest of trees. I stopped being Harold Bennett, the retired husband. I became Hal Bennett, the specialist. I hit the space bar, pausing the video. I rewound 5 seconds. I played it again at quarter speed. I leaned closer to the monitor, my eyes narrowing behind my glasses. To someone who didn't know better, to a terrified wife watching this on a tablet while her son-in-law screamed about police and prison, this was damning. It was perfect, but to me it was a math problem, and the math didn't add up. I focused on the lighting in the video. The truck passes under a street lamp on the left side of the road. The light sweeps across the hood, moving left to right. I moved the video forward frame by frame. Inside the cab, the shadow on my face shifted, but it shifted 3 degrees too late. The light source outside moved, but the shadow across the bridge of my nose lagged behind by a fraction of a second. It was a computer error. The lighting program used to create my face had not perfectly matched with the background lighting of the real footage. 3 degrees. That was the difference between a murderer and a victim. I zoomed in on the eyes in the video. I blinked. It was a rapid, nervous blink. But look at the tiny squares around the eyelids. I pressed my face almost against the screen. Pixelation. Tiny square distortions. When the eyelid came down, the skin texture blurred for a microsecond. The computer program struggled with the rapid motion of the blink. It was the fingerprint of a deepfake, a computer-generated mask placed over someone else's face. I looked at the hands on the wheel. They were gripping tight, but there was no wedding ring. I have worn my gold ring for 45 years. It has never left my finger. The skin has grown around it. But the man in the video, the actor they hired or the stock footage they used, had bare hands. I sat back, breathing out a long, shaky breath. The sickness in my stomach vanished, replaced by a cold, hard block of ice. It was fake. All of it. Jason worked in digital marketing. He knew video editing. He knew about AI programs. He probably paid some kid on the dark web a few $1,000s to make this. Or maybe he used the high-end software at his company after hours. They hadn't just stolen our money. They had created a show of cruelty. They showed this to Patty. They told her I had killed a woman. They told her I had run away from the scene. They told her that the only thing standing between me and a life in prison was a team of expensive lawyers who could make the evidence disappear. That explained the wire transfers. Urgent legal payment. Patty wasn't having a dementia episode. She was having a trauma response. She had sold our future to save my life. She had given them everything we had because she thought she was buying my freedom. She must have been terrified. I imagined her sitting in that kitchen, watching this video, her hands shaking, while Emily poured poison in her ear and Jason threatened to call the FBI. They weaponized her love for me. They used her loyalty as the key to unlock the bank vault. I looked at the file name again. Evidence. It wasn't evidence of a crime I committed. It was evidence of the crime they were committing. Blackmail, fraud, elder abuse. This video was a felony, and they had emailed it. They had left a digital trail that led straight back to them. I felt a tear run down my cheek. Not of sadness, but of pure, boiling rage. They thought I was weak. They thought I would just accept the story that my wife was crazy and I was too old to care for her. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Suddenly, a soft beep echoed in the quiet basement. I looked over at the other monitor, the one connected to the ghost server. The green bar had reached the end. The text on the screen had changed. Data recovery complete. 172 hours of deleted footage were back. I wiped the tear from my cheek. I cracked my knuckles. I had the fake video. Now I was going to see the making of it. I was going to see the rehearsal. I was going to see exactly what they did to my wife when they thought no one was watching. I moved the mouse to the ghost server. I opened the file for yesterday afternoon. It was time to watch the show. And once I had seen enough, I was going to bring the curtain down on them so hard it would shatter their world. ____________ I clicked on the file labeled October 23rd, 1400 hours. The timestamp was 2 p.m., exactly 2 hours after I had left for the lake. The ghost server footage was crystal clear, high-definition wide-angle, capturing the entire living room from the hidden camera inside the smoke detector. There was no sound at first, just the image of my wife Patty sitting on the sofa. She was holding a cup of tea, looking out the window, peaceful. She had no idea her life was about to be destroyed. Then the front door opened. Jason and Emily walked in. They didn't knock. They didn't say hello. They marched in like a police team conducting a raid. Jason was holding a tablet. Emily was carrying a thick manila envelope. I turned up the volume on my headphones. "Mom, we need to talk," Emily said. Her voice wasn't warm. It was sharp, urgent. "Now, put the tea down." Patty looked up, startled. "Emily? Jason, what's wrong? Is something wrong? Is it your father?" "It's Dad," Jason said, stepping into the center of the room. He towered over her. "He's done something terrible, Patty. Something unforgivable." I watched my wife's face collapse. "What? Is he hurt?" "He isn't hurt," Jason spat. "But he hurt someone else. Badly." He thrust the tablet into her hands. I knew exactly what was playing on that screen. It was the deepfake, the video of me running over a woman. I watched Patty watch the video. Her hands started to shake. She brought one hand up to her mouth. She gasped. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be hell. He's a careful driver. He would never—" "It's him, Mom," Emily snapped. "Look at the truck. Look at the face. He was drunk, or he fell asleep, or he just lost his mind. It doesn't matter. He killed a woman, Mom. She's dead. And he ran." Jason added, leaning down, getting right in her face. "He ran from the scene. Do you know what that means? That's manslaughter. That's 20 years in prison. At his age, that's a death sentence." Patty dropped the tablet on the cushion. She stood up, her legs wobbly. "We have to call him. We have to go to the police. If it was an accident—" "No police!" Jason screamed. The volume was so loud I had to turn it down. On the screen, Patty flinched as if she had been slapped. "The FBI is already looking for the vehicle. If you call the police, they'll come here with a SWAT team. They'll drag him out in handcuffs. Do you want to see Hal die in a cage?" "Please," Patty sobbed. She sank to her knees on the rug. My proud, strong wife, kneeling on the floor of her own home. "Please help him. You're smart. You know people. Jason, Emily, please save your father." It broke me, watching that, sitting in the dark basement. I felt a physical pain in my chest that was sharper than any heart attack. She didn't doubt me for a second, but she believed the evidence of her eyes. She didn't care about right or wrong. She just wanted to save me. She was willing to destroy herself to keep me safe. Emily sat down on the coffee table facing her mother. She didn't offer a hug. She didn't offer comfort. She offered a deal. "We can save him, Mom," Emily said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Jason knows someone. A lawyer who specializes in making problems like this disappear. But it's expensive. Very expensive." "I don't care," Patty cried. "Take whatever you need. Just don't let them take Hal." "We need cash," Jason said. "Untraceable. We need to move him. We can get him across the border to Mexico tonight, to a private facility. But we need to pay off the witnesses and the police chief." It was such a clumsy Hollywood lie. Bribing a police chief. Hiding in Mexico. But to a terrified 70-year-old woman who thinks her husband is a murderer, it sounded like a lifeline. Emily opened the manila envelope. She pulled out a stack of papers. "We need you to sign these, Mom. It authorizes us to empty the retirement accounts to pay the lawyer. And this," she held up another document. "This is the power of attorney and the house deed transfer. We need to sell it fast to cover the ongoing costs of hiding him." "The house?" Patty asked, looking around wildly. "But where will we live?" "It doesn't matter where you live if Dad is in prison," Jason shouted. "Do you want the house? Or do you want your husband? Sign it, Mom." Emily pressed a pen into Patty's shaking hand. "Do it for Dad. Do it now or we can't help him." I watched my wife sign away 40 years of hard work. I watched her log into the bank app on her phone while Jason read out the account numbers. I watched her destroy our future with a few strokes of a pen. All because she loved me too much to let me face the consequences of a crime I didn't commit. After the papers were signed and the transfers were made, Patty sat back on her heels, exhausted, weeping. "When can I see him?" she asked, her voice broken. "When will he be safe?" Jason stood up, tucking the signed documents into his jacket. He looked at Emily. A smirk played on his lips. "Soon," Jason said. "Just sit tight. Don't answer the phone. Don't open the door. If anyone asks, you don't know anything." "But he's coming home from the lake today," Patty said, confusion clouding her panic. "He'll be here soon. He won't remember any of this," Jason said, his voice cold and dismissive. "The trauma. He'll probably block it out. When he walks through that door, he's going to act like nothing happened." Jason leaned in close to Emily, not realizing the microphone on the smoke detector picked up whispers just as well as shouts. "The old man will be confused anyway," Jason said to his wife. "He'll come home, see her like this, and we just stick to the script. We tell him she lost her mind. We tell him she's having a dementia episode. He's weak. He'll believe whatever we tell him. We get him to sign the rest of the papers to commit her, and then we dump them both in the state home by Friday." Emily nodded. "It's cleaner that way. No loose ends." I froze the video. I stared at Jason's face on the screen. "The old man will be confused. He's weak." I slowly closed the laptop lid. The light from the screen vanished, plunging me back into the darkness of the basement. The pain I felt for Patty, the heartbreak of seeing her on her knees, began to harden. It cooled, crystallized, and transformed into something else entirely. It became a cold, focused rage. They hadn't just stolen my money. They hadn't just lied. They had tortured my wife for sport. They had counted on my love for her to be my weakness. They counted on me being too old, too tired, and too stupid to fight back. I stood up. My knees popped, but I didn't feel it. I checked my watch. 4:17 a.m. I had the evidence. I had the video of the fake accident. I had the video of the blackmail. I had the bank logs. But I wasn't going to call the police yet. Not just yet. Jason wanted a show. He wanted to play make-believe. Fine. I would give him the performance of a lifetime. I would be the confused old man he expected. I would let him think he had won. I would let him walk right up to the finish line. And then I was going to bury him. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror one last time. I messed up my hair just enough to look disheveled, but not enough to look fake. I left my shirt untucked on one side. I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes until they were red and watery. Then I practiced the tremor in my right hand. It had to be subtle, the kind of involuntary shake that suggests brain problems, the kind that screams weakness. I was about to give the most important performance of my life. If I failed, if they sensed even a flicker of the man who used to stare down defense auditors, it was all over. They would run. They would destroy the evidence. Or worse, they might hurt Patty. I took a deep breath, let my shoulders slump forward, curving my spine into the posture of a defeated old man, and opened the bedroom door. The smell of bacon and coffee drifted up from the kitchen. It was sickening. They were eating breakfast in my house, cooking food from my refrigerator, celebrating their victory, while my wife sat paralyzed with terror. I walked down the stairs, making sure to grip the railing tightly, taking each step with slow, heavy movements. I heard them laughing in the kitchen. It was a low sound that stopped suddenly as soon as my foot hit the bottom step. I shuffled into the kitchen. The scene was exactly as I expected. Jason was sitting at the head of the table, my spot, reading news on his tablet. Emily was at the stove flipping pancakes. Patty was sitting in the corner, staring into a mug of black coffee, her face pale and worn, looking like she had aged 10 years in a single night. When I entered, the room went silent. Emily turned around, a spatula in her hand. Her smile was tight, practiced. "Good morning, Dad. You slept late." I stopped in the middle of the room. I looked around, blinking slowly, letting my mouth hang open just a little. I looked at Jason, then at Emily, and finally at Patty. I let confusion wash over my face. I feel strange, Emily," I said, my voice raspy and weak. I lifted my right hand to my forehead, letting the tremor show. "Why is it so bright in here? What time is it?" "It's 9 o'clock, Dad," Emily said, watching me closely. "How are you feeling?" "My head feels heavy," I stammered, "like it's full of cotton." I tried to think. I furrowed my brow. "I went fishing yesterday, didn't I? I remember the lake." But after that, I trailed off, looking at them with wide, fearful eyes. "I don't remember coming home. I don't remember dinner. Why don't I remember?" I saw it happen. The look that passed between Emily and Jason was electric. It was a mixture of relief and pure predatory triumph. They had been worried that I would ask questions, that I would fight back. But instead, here I was, serving up their own story on a silver platter. I was giving them exactly what they wanted. A confused, losing his mind old man who couldn't trust his own brain. Jason put down his tablet. He stood up and walked over to me. His face arranged itself into a mask of deep, fake concern. He put a hand on my shoulder. It took every ounce of my willpower not to break his wrist. "Hal, you really don't remember?" Jason asked softly. "Remember what?" I asked, letting panic creep into my voice. "Did something happen? Is it Patty? Is she sick?" I looked at my wife. Patty looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. She opened her mouth, perhaps to tell me the truth, perhaps to scream. But Jason cut her off smoothly. "It isn't Patty, Hal. It's you." "Me?" I backed away a step, stumbling slightly against the counter. "What did I do?" Jason sighed, a long, heavy sound of burden. "Dad, you had an accident last night. With the truck." "An accident?" I shook my head. "No. I'm a good driver. I've never had an accident." "You hit someone, Hal," Jason said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It was raining. It was dark. You panicked. You drove away." Froze. I let the blood drain from my face. I grabbed the edge of the counter for support. I hit someone," I whispered. "Yes," Emily said, moving to my other side. "A woman. She didn't make it, Dad." Covered my mouth with my hand. I let out a strangled sob. I looked at Patty. "Is it true, Patty? Is it true?" Patty couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. She believed it because they had shown her the video. She thought my confusion was the result of trauma, the shock of being a killer. "Oh my God," I moaned, sinking into a kitchen chair. "I killed someone. I have to call the police. I have to turn myself in." "No." Jason slammed his hand on the table. Startled me, but I didn't break character. "No police, Hal. We went over this last night. You don't remember, but we handled it." "Handled it?" I looked up at him, wide-eyed. "How can you handle a death?" "We have people, Hal," Jason said, leaning in close. "Serious people. Lawyers who know how to fix things. But the police are already looking for a blue Ford truck. If you turn yourself in now, you'll die in prison. Do you want that? Do you want Patty to be alone?" I shook my head violently.
Non.
No, no prison. Please. Then you have to let us help you, Emily said, placing a hand on my trembling arm. We can protect you, Dad. But it's expensive. The lawyers, the people we need to pay off. It costs a lot of money. I looked at her. I saw the greed shining in her eyes, barely hidden behind the fake concern. Money, I said. Take it. Take whatever you need. The savings account. We already emptied the savings. Mom did that yesterday, Emily said quickly. It wasn't enough, Dad. The payment is huge and we need to get you out of the country, maybe to a special facility in Mexico where they can treat your condition. But we need more cash fast. I put my head in my hands. I rocked back and forth. What do? We don't have anything else. The house, Jason said. The word hung in the air. The ultimate prize. The asset worth nearly $800,000 in this market. We have to sell the house, Hal, Jason continued, his voice urgent. We have a buyer lined up, an investor who pays cash. Quick close. No questions asked. But we need to do it now. Today. Before the police trace the truck to this address. I looked up at him. I let him see a broken man. A man terrified of his own shadow. Sell the house, I whispered. But this is our home. It's just bricks and wood, Dad, Emily said. Your freedom is more important. Mom agrees. Don't you, Mom? Patty nodded jerkily, sobbing into her hands. I took a deep breath. I looked at Jason. Okay, I said. Okay, sell it. Sell everything. Just don't let them take me. Jason breathed out, a smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. Good decision, Hal. We'll handle the paperwork. You just rest. No, I said suddenly, sitting up straighter. They both looked at me, surprised by the sudden shift in my tone. Not later. Now, I stammered, injecting manic energy into my voice. If the police are coming, if they're looking for the truck, we can't wait. I want to sign the papers and get out of here. I don't want to go to jail, Jason. I grabbed Jason's arm, digging my fingers in. Get him here today, please. Jason looked at Emily. He was surprised by my eagerness, but he was also greedy. He saw an opportunity to close the deal before I changed my mind, before my memory came back. I can make a call, Jason said slowly. My contact, Mark. He's a lawyer. He handles real estate transfers. He can be here this afternoon. Do it, I begged. Tell him to bring everything. The deed transfer, the power of attorney, everything. I want it done. Jason pulled his phone out of his pocket. He was beaming. He couldn't help himself. He thought he had just pulled off the heist of the century. I'll call him right now, Jason said. He walked toward the back door, already dialing. Hey, Mark. Yeah, it's a go. The old man is on board. Yeah, bring the papers. 3 o'clock. Don't be late. Emily turned back to the stove, humming a little tune. She thought she had won. She thought she was hours away from being a millionaire. I sat there at the table, my hands still trembling on the placemat. I looked at Patty. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to reach out and squeeze her hand and tell her it was all a lie. But I couldn't. Not yet. Emily was watching. I stood up slowly. I'm going to the garage, I mumbled. I need to pack my tools if we're leaving. Okay, Dad, Emily said dismissively. You do that. I walked out of the kitchen, shuffling past Emily. As soon as I turned the corner into the hallway, out of their line of sight, I straightened my back. The tremor in my hand vanished. The confusion in my eyes hardened into cold steel. I walked to the garage door. I could hear Jason outside on the deck, laughing on the phone. He's ready to sign everything over, Jason was saying. Yeah, totally losing his mind. He thinks he's a fugitive. It's hilarious. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, listening to him laugh at my life, at my wife's terror. Laugh while you can, I thought. Enjoy it. Because at 3 o'clock the laughter stops. I opened the door to the garage and stepped inside. It was time to make a call of my own. It was time to assemble the firing squad. So the heavy door of the garage clicked shut behind me, sealing me inside the only room in the house that still felt like mine. The air here was cool and smelled of sawdust, old motor oil, and WD-40. It was the smell of order, of things that could be fixed with a wrench and a steady hand. Unlike the mess inside my kitchen, this was a problem I knew how to solve. I moved quickly to the workbench. I didn't turn on the main overhead lights. The daylight filtering through the dusty window above the tool chest was enough. I pulled my backup phone from my pocket. It was a cheap flip phone I kept for emergencies, the kind that didn't have GPS tracking or internet apps that my son-in-law could monitor. I dialed a number I had memorized 30 years ago. It rang twice. Bennett. A gravelly voice answered on the second ring.
No hello, no pleasantries.
Just a name and a tone that meant he was ready for anything. It was Saul. Saul Berkowitz. We had served together in the 1970s, and later he had become the only lawyer I trusted with my life. He held my will, my living trust, and the keys to the safety deposit box where the real deeds were kept. He was also the man who had looked Jason in the eye at my daughter's wedding and told me, "That boy has eyes like a shark, Hal. Watch your wallet." I should have listened to him then. "Saul," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "Code red." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence that carried the weight of decades of friendship. Saul knew what code red meant. We had established it years ago when I started consulting for defense firms. It meant the perimeter was breached. It meant the threat was inside the house. It meant I needed immediate help and legal firepower. "Are you safe?" Saul asked. His voice had shifted from tired to alert. "For now," I replied, "but I need you here today. 1500 hours. 3 p.m. "Copy that," Saul said. "What's the situation?" "Hostiles are on site," I said, using the old terminology because it helped keep the emotion away. "It's Emily and Jason. They've emptied the accounts. They've engaged in psychological warfare against Patty. They're attempting to force a signature on a property transfer under threat." I heard the sound of a chair scraping against a floor on the other end. Saul was standing up. "How bad is the damage?" he asked. "Total," I said. "They drained the liquid assets yesterday. 485,000. Now they're coming for the house. They brought someone, some guy named Mark." "Mark?" Saul spat the name out like a curse word. "If it's Mark Reynolds, he lost his license 3 years ago for real estate fraud. He's a bottom feeder, hell." "That fits," I said. "Listen, Saul. I'm gonna play along. I'm playing the confused old man. They think I'm losing my mind. They think I'm terrified of a hit-and-run charge." "A hit-and-run?" "They deep-faked a video," I explained, feeling the anger rise again. "They showed Patty a video of me running over a woman. They used it to steal the cash." There was a long silence on the phone. When Saul spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. "That's a felony, hell. That's blackmail. That's elder abuse. That's criminal terrorism." "I know," I said. "That's why I don't just want you. I need you to bring the sheriff." "I'll call Jim," Saul said immediately. Sheriff Jim Miller was another old friend, a man who took the law seriously. "We'll be there at 14:55. We'll wait for your signal." "No signal," I said. "Just kick the door down at 3. I want them to feel safe." I want them to feel victorious. I want them to have the pen in my hand. And then I want you to bury them. Consider it done, Saul said.
Sitik, Hal.
Don't do anything until we get there. I hung up the phone and slipped it into the bottom of my toolbox, underneath a pile of greasy rags. Now I needed to assemble the ammunition. I walked over to the corner of the garage where I kept an old laser printer covered by a plastic sheet. Emily thought it was broken. She had tried to throw it out twice. It worked perfectly. I connected my laptop to it with a USB cable. I opened the folder containing the evidence I had gathered over the last 4 hours. First, I printed the bank transaction logs. 3 sheets of paper that showed the unauthorized wire transfers, the timestamps, the destination accounts, the theft in black and white. Next, I printed the system logs from the home server, the entry showing the hard erase command executed by user admin yesterday afternoon, the proof that they had destroyed evidence to cover their tracks. Then I printed the frame-by-frame analysis of the deepfake video. I printed the zoomed-in images of the pixel errors around the eyes. I printed the lighting mismatch on the dashboard. I printed the data from the email they sent to Patty. Finally, I printed the audio transcript of their conversation in the living room, the one where Jason called me weak and discussed dumping us in a state home. The printer hummed and buzzed, spitting out page after page of warm paper. I watched the stack grow. This wasn't just paper. It was a prison sentence. It was the end of my relationship with my daughter and the end of her freedom. I took the stack of papers and tapped them on the workbench to straighten them. I looked around for something to hold them. On the shelf above the saw, I found an old faded manila folder. It was perfect. I took a thick black marker and wrote on the front of the folder in large, shaky block letters, "Home sale contract." It was the perfect disguise. They would see this folder on the table and think it contained the deed, the title, the surrender of my life. They would be drooling over it. They wouldn't know that inside was the warrant for their arrest. I slipped the documents inside and closed the folder. I held it in my hands for a moment. It felt heavy, heavier than it should have. It weighed as much as 40 years of fatherhood. 40 years of bedtime stories and tuition payments and driving lessons, all leading to this moment, where I had to destroy my own child to save my wife. I tucked the folder under my arm and walked to the dirty window that looked out over the backyard. The sun was high now. It was a beautiful autumn day. The leaves on the oak trees were turning gold and red. And there, sitting on the stone bench by the flowers, was Patty. She looked small. She was wearing her gardening sweater, but she wasn't gardening. She was just sitting there, staring at her hands. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. My heart clenched. She was still under their control. She was still living in the nightmare they had created for her. She believed I was a killer. She believed we were broke. She believed she had failed me. I checked my watch. 1:45. I had over an hour before Saul and the sheriff arrived. I couldn't let her go into that meeting blind. I couldn't let her endure another hour of terror, thinking she was signing away our home to save me from prison. The stress could kill her before the police even arrived. I needed to wake her up. I needed to break the programming, but I had to do it carefully. Emily was undoubtedly watching from the kitchen window, monitoring her mother like a hawk. If I looked like I was plotting, if I looked clear-headed, Emily would stop me. I had to maintain the act. I had to be the confused old man wandering out into the garden to find his wife. I took a deep breath, brought back the tremor into my hands, and opened the garage door leading to the yard. I shuffled out into the sunlight, blinking against the glare. I walked slowly across the grass, letting my feet drag. I saw movement in the kitchen window. The curtains shifted. Emily was watching. Good. Let her watch. I approached the bench. Patty didn't even look up. She was lost in a world of fear. I sat down next to her. The stone bench was cold. "Patty," I said, my voice loud and wavering, playing to the audience in the window. "Patty, have you seen my blue fishing hat? I can't find it." She looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She looked at me with such deep sadness that I almost broke character. "Oh, Hal," she whispered, "it doesn't matter. The hat doesn't matter." She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was weak. She was saying goodbye. She thought this was the end of everything. I leaned in close, pretending to fix the collar of her sweater. I blocked the line of sight from the kitchen window with my body. I brought my face right next to her ear, and then I dropped the act. "Patty?" I whispered, my voice sharp, clear, and commanding. "Listen to me. Do not react. Keep looking sad. But listen." She stiffened. She tried to pull back to look at me, but I held her shoulder firmly. "Stay still," I hissed. "There was no accident. The video is fake. It's a computer trick. I didn't hit anyone. The police are not looking for me." I felt a shudder run through her body. She let out a small gasp. "What?" she breathed. "They're lying," I said, speaking fast and low. "Jason and Emily. They're stealing our money. They faked the video to scare you. But I know. I have the proof. Saul is coming. The police are coming. We're going to be fine." She turned her head slightly. I saw the confusion fighting with hope in her eyes. It was too much for her to process in a second. "But the money," she whispered. "I sent them the money. We'll get it back," I promised. "But I need you to trust me right now. I need you to be strong for one more hour. Can you do that?" She looked at me. She searched my face. She saw the clarity in my eyes. She saw the man she had married 45 years ago. The man who never lied to her. "Hal?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's me," I said. "I'm here. I'm not losing my mind. I'm fighting back. Do you trust me?" She stared at me for a long heartbeat. Then she squeezed my hand. 3 times. Short, sharp squeezes. "I love you." That's what it meant. She was with me. I pulled back, putting on the mask of the confused old man again. "Well, if you see the hat, let me know," I said loudly, my voice cracking. "I want to look nice for the lawyer." "I'll look for it, Hal," Patty said. Her voice was stronger now. The terror was gone, replaced by a spark of anger. I stood up and shuffled back toward the house. I glanced at the kitchen window. Emily was there, staring out. She looked bored. She looked impatient. She had no idea that the woman sitting on the bench wasn't a victim anymore. She was a partner in crime, and the storm was about to break. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 3 times. The deep booming chimes echoed through the house, signaling the beginning of the end. Right on cue, a heavy knock pounded on the front door. It wasn't a polite tap. It was the knock of someone who was here to collect. Jason practically ran to the door. I heard the lock turn, followed by the sound of male voices exchanging low, urgent greetings. A moment later, Jason returned to the dining room, followed by a man I had never met but instantly recognized by reputation. He was short, balding, and wearing a suit that was too shiny under the kitchen lights. He carried a leather briefcase that looked worn at the handle. He smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap cologne. "This is Mark," Jason announced, gesturing to the man as if he were presenting royalty. "He's the attorney I told you about. He's here to help us with the transition." I looked at Mark. I knew him, or rather Saul knew him. Mark Reynolds. He wasn't a practicing attorney. He had been kicked out 3 years ago for mixing client money in a real estate fraud scheme. Now he was just a bottom-feeding fixer who did dirty paperwork for cash. Mark stepped forward, extending a sweaty hand. "Mr. Bennett, it's a pleasure, although I wish it were under better circumstances. I understand we have a time-sensitive situation here." I shook his hand weakly, letting my grip remain limp. I stared at him with wide, watery eyes. "Time-sensitive," I stammered. "Because of the police?" Mark nodded gravely, pulling out a chair and setting his briefcase on the table. "Precisely. My sources tell me the investigation is moving quickly. We need to secure your assets and get you out of the area before the warrant is issued." He clicked the locks of his briefcase open. The sound was sharp, like a trap snapping shut. He pulled out 2 thick stacks of documents and spread them across my dining room table, covering the lace tablecloth Patty had ironed just 2 days ago. I looked down at the papers. To someone who didn't know better, they looked like standard legal documents. But I knew exactly what I was looking at. On the left was a quitclaim deed, a document used to transfer ownership of property quickly, often between family members without the usual checks. It was the fastest way to strip a man of his home. On the right was a general durable power of attorney. This was the kill shot. If I signed this, I was giving Jason and Emily the legal authority to do anything in my name. They could access my bank accounts, sell my stocks, take out loans in my name, even make medical decisions for me. They could legally bury me alive. Jason stood behind my chair, his presence looming over me like a dark cloud. He placed a hand on the back of my neck. He squeezed. It wasn't affectionate. It was a subtle threat. "We need to move fast, Dad," Jason said, his voice tight with barely hidden excitement. "The buyer for the house is waiting on the wire transfer. He needs the deed signed by 4 o'clock, or the deal falls through. And if the deal falls through, we don't have the cash to pay off the police chief." "The police chief," I repeated, letting my voice tremble. "We have to pay him." "Yes," Emily said, stepping up to the other side of the table. She picked up a heavy, expensive-looking pen and clicked it open. She didn't look at me. She was looking at the house deed, her eyes hungry. "It's the only way to keep you out of prison, Dad. You don't want to go to prison, do you? You wouldn't survive a week in there." I looked at Patty. She was sitting across from me, her hands folded in her lap. She was pale, but her eyes were locked on mine. She gave me a tiny, almost invisible nod. She was holding on. She was waiting for the signal. I reached out and took the pen from Emily. My hand shook violently. I let the pen hover over the paper, making jagged little marks in the air. "Where?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Where do I sign?" "Here," Mark said, pointing a thick finger at the signature line on the quitclaim deed. "And here, and initials here." I leaned forward. I squinted at the text, pretending I had trouble reading the fine print. It says, "Transfer of title for the sum of $10. I read slowly, moving my finger along the line. $10. The house is worth more than $10. "It's just a legal formality, Hal," Jason said, his patience wearing thin. "We're transferring it to a holding company to protect it from being seized by the state when they charge you with manslaughter. We'll sell it for market value later. Just sign the paper." He was losing control. The greed was making him sloppy. He was rushing the con. I lowered the pen to the paper. The tip touched the fiber. Ink bled into the page, forming a small black dot. The room was silent. I could hear Mark's heavy breathing. I could hear the ticking of the clock. They were holding their breath. They were watching the pen like it was a winning lottery ticket. All I had to do was write my name, and they would think they had won. I started to write the letter H. The line was shaky, crooked. Emily put a hand on my back. rubbing it in slow, soothing circles. "That's it, Dad. Just sign it. Then we can go. We can all go on a nice long trip. You, me, Mom. We'll go somewhere warm. It'll be like a vacation. A vacation." She was lying to my face while she stole the roof over my head. She was planning to dump me in a state facility and fly to Mexico with my money. I stopped writing. I lifted the pen. The H was incomplete, just a vertical line. "What's wrong?" Jason barked. "Why did you stop?" I put the pen down on the table. I sat back in the chair, rubbing my temples. I feel confused," I said. "We know you're confused, Dad," Emily said, her voice sharpening. "That's why you need to sign, so we can take care of you." "No," I said. "Not that. I mean, I'm confused about the accident." Mark looked at Jason. Jason looked at the ceiling, letting out a frustrated breath. "We went over this, Hal," Jason said through gritted teeth. "You hit a woman. You ran." "I know," I said. "I know you told me that, but I can't picture it. My mind is fuzzy. I remember the rain. I remember the noise, but I can't see her face." I looked up at Jason, making my eyes wide and pleading. "I need to see it again, Jason." "See what?" Jason asked. "The video," I said. "The one you showed Patty. I need to see it one more time, just so I know for sure. Just so I can sleep at night knowing I'm doing the right thing by signing this." Jason slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. We don't have time for a movie night, Hal. The buyer is waiting." "Please," I whispered. "I just need to be sure. If I see what I did, then I'll sign. I promise." I picked up the pen again and held it up, offering a trade. The signature for the video. Jason looked at the pen. He looked at Mark, who shrugged. He looked at the clock. It was 3:15. "Fine," Jason spat. He reached into his messenger bag and pulled out his laptop. He slammed it onto the table, pushing the legal documents aside. He didn't notice the manila folder I had placed on the corner of the table earlier, the one labeled home sale contract that actually contained the evidence of his crimes. He was too focused on closing the deal. He opened the lid and typed in his password with angry stabbing motions. He went to the file. He spun the laptop around so it faced me. "Here," Jason said, pointing at the screen. "Watch it. Remind yourself what a killer looks like. And then sign the papers so we can save your miserable life." I looked at the laptop screen. The video player was open. The thumbnail showed my truck in the rain. I looked at Patty. She was watching me. Her hands were still. She knew. I looked at Emily. She was crossing her arms, tapping her foot impatiently. I reached out, not for the pen, but for the remote control that was sitting on the sideboard behind me. I had placed it there earlier, right next to the fruit bowl. I picked up the remote. "What are you doing?" Emily asked. "The screen is too small," I mumbled. "My eyes, they aren't what they used to be. I want to see it on the big TV." I pointed the remote at the 65-inch smart TV mounted on the wall above the fireplace. Jason rolled his eyes. "You've got to be kidding me." "Just connect it, Jason," Emily snapped. "Let him see it so we can get this over with." Jason groaned. He hit a few keys on his keyboard, starting the wireless screen connection to the TV. Connecting to living room TV appeared on the laptop screen. The big screen on the wall flickered to life. It mirrored Jason's desktop. "Okay," Jason said. "Are you happy now? Watch." He moved his finger to the play button on his laptop. But I was faster. I didn't just want to watch his fake video. I wanted to show them mine. On the remote in my hand, I didn't press the volume button. I pressed the input source button. I had rigged the TV earlier. Input HDMI 2 was not connected to the cable box. It was connected to a wireless receiver linked directly to my server in the basement. I pressed the button. The screen on the wall went black for a second. Jason frowned, tapping his laptop. What the hell? Then the image reappeared. But it wasn't the desktop of Jason's computer. It was a video file, but not the one Jason expected. It was a high-definition wide-angle shot of this very room. The timestamp in the corner read October 23rd. Yesterday. Jason froze. Emily stopped tapping her foot. Mark looked up from his phone. On the screen, Jason and Emily were standing in the middle of the living room. They were laughing. They were holding scripts. They were rehearsing. I pressed play on the remote. Jason's voice boomed out of the surround sound speakers, clear and loud. "Old man Harold is so dumb," the Jason on the screen said, laughing as he poured himself a drink. "We scare him a little, and he'll wet his pants. We get the house, and then we dump them both in the cheapest state facility we can find." The color drained from Jason's face in the real room. He looked at the TV, then at me. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Emily let out a strangled gasp. The video continued. Emily on the screen was smiling. "He won't even fight back. He trusts us. It's pathetic, really." I stood up. I stopped shaking. I stood to my full height, my back straight, my shoulders squared. I took off my glasses and tossed them onto the table, right on top of the power of attorney. I looked Jason in the eye. The confusion was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard stare of a man who had hunted predators for a living. I picked up the manila folder I had prepared. I didn't open it. I just held it. "I may be old, Jason," I said, my voice steady and deep, filling the room. "And I may be tired, but I have never been stupid. And I have never, ever, forgotten how to take out the trash." Jason lunged for the laptop, trying to stop the video. But it was too late. The truth was out. And the sound of sirens was already rising in the distance, getting louder with every second. So the screen flickered. A glitch of black static, and then the image stabilized. It wasn't the rainy street from Jason's laptop. It was a wide-angle high-definition view of this very room, the living room I had built with my own hands. The timestamp in the corner glowed red. October 23rd, 1400 hours. Yesterday. Jason frowned, tapping his laptop keys furiously. "What is this? The connection is glitching. Why is it showing the room?" "It's not a glitch," I said, my voice dropping the tremor, smoothing out into the cool, flat tone of a man giving a mission briefing. On the 65-inch screen, the past came alive. Jason and Emily walked into the frame. They were not worried. They were not sad about a hit and run. They were holding wine glasses. They were laughing. I watched the color drain from the real Jason's face in real time. He stopped tapping the keyboard. His mouth fell open. On the screen, the recorded Jason clinked his glass against Emily's. He took a drink and wiped his mouth. A smirk was plastered across his face. "Old man Harold is so dumb," the digital Jason sneered, his voice booming through the surround sound speakers with crystal clarity. "We scare him a little, show him the video, and he'll wet his pants. He'll sign anything to stay out of jail." Emily on the screen laughed, a high, cruel sound that scraped against my soul. "And Mom? She's already broken. She'll do whatever we say." "Exactly," the recorded Jason continued, pacing around the room, the same room where he now sat frozen. "We get the power of attorney. We sell the house for cash, and then we dump them both in the cheapest nursing home we can find. Some state-run hellhole where they won't last 6 months. and we'll be in Mexico by Christmas. The silence in the dining room was absolute. The only sound was the recorded laughter of my children plotting my death, echoing from the walls. In the chair next to me, Emily let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream. It was a gasp of pure, suffocating horror. She covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes darting from the screen to me, then to Jason, realizing there was no way to spin this. There was no misunderstanding. They were caught in 4K resolution. Jason looked like he had been shot. He stared at the TV. Then, slowly, terrified, he turned his head to look at me. The arrogance was gone. The predator was gone. All that was left was a small, scared thief who realized he had broken into the wrong house. Mark, the fake lawyer, reacted first. He was a survivor, someone who knew when the lights were about to come on. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward, crashing onto the hardwood floor with a sound like a gunshot. "I didn't know," Mark stammered, sweat appearing instantly on his bald head. He grabbed his briefcase, fumbling with the locks, trying to shove the illegal deeds back inside. "I was just hired for the paperwork. I'm not part of this. I'm leaving." He turned to run for the door. "Sit down," I barked. It wasn't the voice of the confused old grandfather. It was a command. It was the voice that had directed security operations for classified facilities. Cracked through the room like a whip. Mark froze. He looked at me, and for the first time he saw the man behind the act. He saw the steel in my spine. He dropped the briefcase. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. I stood up. I didn't use the table for support. I didn't groan. I straightened my body, standing to my full height, my shoulders squared, my hands steady. I reached up and took off the reading glasses I had used as a prop. I tossed them onto the table. They landed with a clatter, right on top of the power of attorney they had tried to force me to sign. I looked at Emily. She was shrinking into her chair, sobbing silently, shaking her head as if to deny the reality on the screen. Then I turned my gaze to Jason. "You called me stupid," I said. My voice was low, calm, and terrifyingly clear. "You said I would wet my pants. You said I was a clueless old man who played number puzzles." I walked around the table. Jason flinched as I approached, pressing himself back into his chair. He looked at my hands, perhaps expecting violence. But I didn't need violence. I had something much worse. I picked up the manila folder I had prepared in the garage, the one labeled home sale contract. I dropped it onto the table in front of him. "Open it," I ordered. Jason's trembling hand reached out. He opened the cover. He didn't find the deed to the house. He found the printouts of the bank transfers. He found the system logs showing he had wiped the drive. He found the frame-by-frame breakdown of his deepfake video, proving it was fake. And on top, he found a copy of the lawsuit I had drafted in my head 1,000 times over the last 12 hours. "This?" Jason choked out. "What is this?" "It's the end of your life as you know it," I said. I leaned in close, placing my hands on the table, looming over him. I let him see the fire in my eyes. I let him see the intelligence he had ignored, the strength he had underestimated. "I might be old, Jason," I said, carefully pronouncing every word. "And I might be tired, but I have never been stupid. And I have never, ever, forgotten how to take out the trash." Jason's eyes went wide. He lunged for the laptop, slamming it shut, trying to kill the video feed, as if hiding the image would erase the crime. "It's too late," he screamed, panic taking over. "We can fix this, Dad." "Listen, don't call me Dad," I said. Outside, the sound of gravel crunching under heavy tires broke the tension. Blue and red lights flashed through the front window, painting the walls in alternating strokes of color. The front door burst open. "Sheriff's Department," a voice boomed. Sheriff Jim Miller stepped into the hallway, his hand on his holster, followed by 2 deputies and Saul, who looked grim and satisfied. "Nobody move," Jim commanded. I stood straight, watching as my son-in-law and daughter realized that the only place they were going today was a holding cell. I looked at Patty. She was weeping, but she was looking at me, and in her eyes I saw safety. The trap had sprung, and the wolves were caught. The front door didn't just open. It exploded inward with a force that rattled the picture frames on the hallway walls. Sheriff Jim Miller stepped across the threshold, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor, filling the entryway with an imposing wall of uniform and authority. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't here for a friendly neighborhood visit. He was here to do the job he had sworn to do. Behind him, 2 deputies moved with practiced skill, their hands already resting on their holsters, scanning the room for threats. And behind them walked Saul Berkowitz, carrying his leather briefcase like it was a shield, his face set in a grim line of determination. "Nobody move," Jim commanded again, his voice filling the silence left by the shocking video on the television screen. Jason scrambled backward, knocking his chair over. He looked from me to the sheriff, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for a vent to crawl through. He raised his hands, palms out, a pathetic gesture of surrender that came too late. "Officer, thank God you're here," Jason stammered, his voice rising higher in panic. "There's been a mistake. My father-in-law, he's having an episode. He's confused. We were just trying to help him." Jim didn't even look at him. He walked straight to the dining table, looking at the scattered papers, the open laptop, and the manila folder I had dropped in front of Jason. He looked at me. "Are you safe, Hal?" Jim asked. "I'm safe, Jim," I replied, my voice steady. "But I'd like these people removed from my property immediately." That was the signal. The deputies moved in. One of them grabbed Mark, the fake lawyer, who was trying to edge his way toward the back door. Mark yelped as his arm was twisted behind his back. The sound of ratcheting steel handcuffs cut through the air. "You can't do this," Mark shouted, sweat pouring down his face. "I'm legal counsel. This is protected." "You're a kicked-out real estate agent named Mark Reynolds," Saul said, stepping forward. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice was calm, dry, and terrifyingly final. "You're practicing law without a license, Mark. And that's the least of your problems today." The deputy shoved Mark toward the door. Then they turned their attention to Jason. Jason tried to run. It was a stupid, instinctive move. He lunged toward the hallway, maybe thinking he could get to the garage, maybe thinking he could overpower a 70-year-old sheriff. He didn't make it 2 steps. Jim grabbed him by the collar of his expensive shirt and slammed him against the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of him. "Jason, turn around," Jim ordered. "You're under arrest." "For what?" Jason wheezed as the cuffs bit into his wrists. "I didn't do anything. We were just signing papers. This is a civil matter." Saul opened his briefcase. He pulled out a document, crisp and white. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at Jason with the kind of disgust usually reserved for something you scrape off your shoe. "It's not a civil matter, Jason," Saul said. "I've spoken with the district attorney. Based on the evidence Mr. Bennett provided, you're being charged with conspiracy to commit blackmail, wire fraud, identity theft, evidence tampering, and most seriously, elder abuse in the 1st degree." "Elder abuse?" Jason spat, struggling against the deputy's grip. "He's fine. Look at him. He's standing right there." "Mental anguish is abuse, Jason," Saul continued, his voice hardening. Terrorizing a woman with deepfake videos to steal her life savings is abuse. Drugging her to keep her quiet is abuse. And that video you made? That's a cybercrime that the FBI is going to be very interested in. Jason went limp. The fight drained out of him as the reality of the charges hit him. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, begging for the mercy he had refused to show us. "Hal, please," Jason whimpered. "I'm family. Think about the grandkids. You should have thought about them before you stole their inheritance," I said coldly. Then there was Emily. My daughter had not moved from her chair. She was frozen, her face pale, watching her husband and her hired criminal get dragged away in chains. When the deputy approached her, she finally snapped out of her trance. She didn't fight. Instead, she threw herself onto the floor. She scrambled on her hands and knees toward me, grabbing the bottom of my pants. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, making her look like a twisted version of the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. "Daddy, please," she sobbed, clutching my leg. "It wasn't me. It was Jason. He made me do it. I told him we shouldn't. I told him it was wrong. He forced me. Daddy, you know I love you. You know I would never hurt you." I looked down at her. I searched her face for any sign of the daughter I had raised. I looked for the girl who used to bring me drawings from school. I looked for the woman who had promised to take care of us when we got old. I didn't see her. All I saw was a stranger who had looked me in the eye an hour ago and told me to sign away my home so she could go on vacation. A stranger who had drugged her own mother. She was selling out her husband just as easily as she had sold out her parents. There was no loyalty in her. There was only survival. "Get up, Emily," I said. She stood up, shaking, wiping her nose. A flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. She thought she had fooled me. She thought the old man was soft. "Daddy, I'm so sorry," she blubbered. "I'll testify against him. I'll tell them everything. Just tell them to let me go." I reached into the folder on the table. The folder she thought contained the deed to the house. I pulled out a thick stack of papers stapled together with a blue cover sheet. I handed it to her. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. I looked her dead in the eye. "This is a restraining order," I said. "It bars you from coming within 500 feet of me, your mother, or this house. If you violate it, you go straight to jail." She stared at the papers, her mouth opening and closing. "And underneath that," I continued, my voice flat and unyielding, "is a civil lawsuit. I'm suing you, Emily, not just Jason. I'm suing you for the return of the $485,000 you stole yesterday, plus damages for emotional suffering, plus legal fees." "Daddy, you can't," she whispered. "We spent some of it. We paid off debts. We don't have that kind of money. Then you'll work for the rest of your life to pay me back," I said. "I don't care if you have to scrub floors until you're 80. You will pay back every single cent you took from your mother." "But I'm your daughter," she wailed. I looked at Patty. She was standing by the window watching the scene. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked strong. She looked at Emily, and then she turned her back. "You stopped being my daughter the moment you decided my life was worth less than a trip to Mexico," I said. I nodded to the deputy. He stepped forward and pulled Emily's hands behind her back. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut on her wrists was the loudest thing in the room. "No, Daddy, no!" she screamed as they dragged her toward the door. "Mom, help me! Mom!" Patty didn't turn around. She kept her back to the room, staring out at the garden where we had sat together an hour ago. The deputies marched them out. Jason was weeping silently. Mark was trying to negotiate a deal with the heir. Emily was screaming like an animal. I walked to the front window. I watched as they were loaded into the back of the patrol cars. The neighbors were out on their lawns watching the show. The flashing blue and red lights painted the street in strokes of chaotic color. Jim stopped by the door before he left. He put a hand on my shoulder. "We'll need you down at the station tomorrow to give a formal statement, Hal," he said softly. "But for tonight, the house is yours. They won't bother you again." "Thank you, Jim," I said. He nodded, tipped his hat to Patty's back, and walked out, closing the door firmly behind him. The engines of the patrol cars roared to life. The sirens chirped once, and then they pulled away, taking the poison that had infected our lives with them. Silence returned to the house, but it wasn't the heavy, terrifying silence of yesterday. It was the clean, empty silence of a storm that has finally passed. I stood there for a long time watching the empty street. My heart felt heavy, like a stone in my chest. I had won. I had saved my home. I had saved my money. I had saved my wife. But I had lost my children. And that was a grief that no amount of justice could ever truly fix. So the blue and red lights finally faded from the living room walls, leaving behind the stillness of a house that had just survived a hurricane. The silence that followed the sirens was heavy, but it was no longer threatening. It was the silence of a battlefield after the last shot has been fired and the smoke begins to clear. I turned away from the window and looked at the damage in my dining room. The table was still scattered with the debris of their greed. The fake deed, the power of attorney, the spilled coffee, the laptop Jason had slammed shut in panic. It looked like a crime scene, which I suppose it was. Patty was sitting on the sofa, her hands wrapped around a throw pillow. She was trembling, a fine continuous shake that moved through her frame. She wasn't crying anymore. She was in shock. She had watched her son-in-law be dragged out in handcuffs and her daughter scream for mercy that she didn't deserve. That's not something a mother gets over in an hour. I walked into the kitchen. I needed to do something normal. I needed a routine to anchor us back to reality. I filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove. The simple action of turning the dial and hearing the gas ignite felt grounding. I reached into the cupboard and took out 2 mugs. Not the fancy ones we saved for guests, but the chipped, comfortable ones we used every day. When the kettle whistled, I poured the water over the tea bags. Earl Grey for her, black coffee for me. I added 2 spoons of sugar to hers, just the way she liked it. I carried the mugs into the living room and set hers on the coaster in front of her. "Drink this, Patty," I said softly. "It'll help with the shock." She looked up at me. Her eyes were still wide, but the terror was gone. In its place was a deep, exhausting relief. She took the mug. Her hands shook so much the liquid rippled, but she managed to take a sip. The warmth seemed to bring a little color back to her cheeks. "Thank you, Hal," she whispered. "You saved us." I sat down next to her and put my arm around her shoulders. "We saved each other," I said. "You held strong, Patty. You were the bravest person in this room." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a moment we just sat there, 2 survivors in the ruins of our family, breathing in the scent of tea and the dust settling around us. Across the room, Saul was packing his briefcase. He moved with slow, careful precision, gathering the evidence files, the signed papers, and the restraining orders. He snapped the locks shut and walked over to us. He didn't look like a lawyer who had just won a major victory. He looked like a tired old soldier who hated that the war was necessary. "Hal," Saul said, sitting in the armchair across from us, "the sheriff has taken them to the county lockup. They'll be processed tonight. The court appearance will be tomorrow morning. I'll handle the press and the initial hearings. You don't need to be there tomorrow if you don't want to be. I nodded. Keep them locked up, Saul. Don't let them post bail. I'll do my best, Saul promised. Given the flight risk and the nature of the blackmail, I think the judge will set it high. But Hal, we need to talk about the next step. We need to talk about the money. I looked at the table where the bank printout still lay. $485,000. It was back in our control, or it would be soon. But money, as I had learned in the last 24 hours, was not just currency. It was a target. It was the scent of blood in the water that attracts sharks. I stood up and walked to the dining table. I pushed aside the fake deed and cleared a space. Do it, Saul, I said. Let's lock it down. Saul opened a separate folder in his briefcase. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. He had prepared it in the car on the way over, based on our brief phone call. This is the Irrevocable Asset Protection Trust, Saul explained, laying it out. Once you sign this, and once Patty signs this, the assets are no longer legally yours. They belong to the trust. Explain what that means for us, I said, mostly for Patty's benefit. It means, Saul said, looking at Patty gently, that no one can ever force you to sign a check again. Not a scammer, not a lawsuit, and not a family member. You'll receive a monthly amount for living expenses, generous enough to live comfortably. But the main money, the bulk of the savings, it's locked behind a firewall. To withdraw any significant amount, you need the unanimous signature of a 3-person board. Me, an independent fiduciary, and you. If anyone puts a gun to your head or threatens you with jail, you physically cannot give them the money. It was the nuclear option. It was a dead man's switch for our finances. It meant giving up control to ensure security. It meant admitting that we were vulnerable, that we were targets, and that we needed a wall higher than we could climb ourselves. Patty looked at the paper. She didn't hesitate. She put down her tea, walked to the table, and picked up the pen. Her hand was steadier now. She signed her name with confidence. Never again, she said softly. Never again will I let fear make my decisions. I took the pen from her. I looked at the document. It was a surrender of freedom in a way, but it was also a fortress. It was the final security patch in a system that had been hacked. I signed my name, Harold Bennett. Saul took the document and stamped it with his official seal. It's done, he said. You're bulletproof. He stood up, shaking my hand and then hugging Patty gently. Get some sleep, he advised. It's over. The wolves are in the cage, and the door is locked. I walked Saul to the door. I watched him get into his car and drive away, his taillights disappearing down the dark street. I locked the front door. I engaged the deadbolt. Then I engaged the secondary security latch I had installed years ago. I went back into the living room. Patty had finished her tea. She looked exhausted, her eyelids drooping. Go to bed, Patty, I said. I'll clean this up. She kissed my cheek. Her lips were warm. Are you coming up? She asked. In a minute, I said. I just need a moment. She nodded and walked up the stairs. I listened to her footsteps, the familiar creak of the floorboards, the sound of the bedroom door closing. I was alone. I began to clean. I threw the pizza boxes Jason had brought into the trash. I gathered the fake legal papers and fed them into the fireplace. I struck a match and watched them curl and blacken, the lies turning into ash and smoke. I wiped the coffee rings off the table. I put the chairs back in their places. I tried to scrub the presence of my children out of my house. When the room was clean, I walked to the window. I looked out at the street, at the spot where the police cruiser had been parked. The neighborhood was quiet. The neighbors had gone back inside, their curiosity satisfied. To them, it was just drama. To me, it was the end of a life. I felt a hollowness in my chest. It wasn't regret. I didn't regret calling Saul. I didn't regret the trap. I didn't regret sending them to jail. They had earned every bit of it. But I felt a deep, aching sadness. I wasn't sad because I had lost my children. The truth was, I had lost them a long time ago. I lost them when they started valuing things over people. I lost them when they looked at their mother and saw an ATM instead of a human being. I lost them when they looked at me and saw a burden instead of a father. I was sad because I hadn't seen it sooner. I was sad because I had let my love blind me. I had made excuses for them for years. I had ignored the selfishness, the entitlement, the small cruelties, thinking it was just a phase, thinking they would grow out of it. I had let them into the fortress because they knew the password. I had spent my career building firewalls to keep foreign enemies out of government computers, but I had left the front door of my own life unlocked for the enemies who shared my last name. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass of the window. The reflection of the room behind me was dark and empty. I thought about the future. It would be lonely. Thanksgiving would be quiet. Christmas would be just the two of us. There would be no grandkids running through the halls, no family photos to send out in cards. But there would be peace. There would be safety. There would be the truth. And looking at the empty street, I realized that peace, even lonely peace, was better than living with vipers. I turned away from the window. I turned off the living room light. People say blood is thicker than water. They say family is everything. But sometimes blood is just the most dangerous kind of poison. Kills you slowly from the inside while you're smiling and pretending everything is fine. And the only cure is the ruthless truth. I walked toward the stairs, ready to join my wife. The house was secure. The perimeter was held. And for the first time in a long time, I was finally truly home. My life taught me that blood is not a shield against cruelty. Sometimes the ones holding the knife aren't strangers, but the children you once carried in your arms. I mistook parental sacrifice for unconditional obligation. But I learned that respect from your children must be earned, not assumed. The most expensive lesson wasn't the $485,000. It was having the courage to face the ugly truth. Blind love is poison. Don't wait until you're cornered to set boundaries. Careful preparation and a cold head aren't paranoia. They're the final fortress protecting the peace of your golden years. If my fight for justice touched a nerve, please hit that like button to spread this message. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next real-life story. Have you ever had to stand against family to do what's right? Share your story in the comments. I'll read every single one.